welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special coming to you from Agra. With this magnificent backdrop behind me, it's only fitting that we discuss Indian tourism, though many believe it has already entered the danger zone. We're in the midst of a global slowdown. India's GDP has been weaning off, expected at about 6.5% to 7% this fiscal. But let's face it, corporate travel has been hit, leisure travel has been hit, and incredible India not seeming so incredible anymore, with other destinations stealing our market share, be it Singapore, be it Cambodia, be it even Turkey for that matter. So how can we reverse that trend? For that, I have an esteemed panel with me. I have with me Nakul Anand, who's of course the chairman of CII's National Committee on Tourism and also the executive director of ITC. Arjun Sharma, the co-chairman of CII's National Committee on Tourism, as well as the managing director of Le Passage India. Sujit Banerjee, the secretary general of World Travel and Tourism Council India Initiative, and Kapil Kaur, the South Asia CEO of Kappa. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for joining me here at CNBC TV 18. Nakul Anand, I'm going to begin with you. We have incredible India. We believe that we have a lot more to offer than perhaps a Thailand, a Singapore, or even a Turkey. But the fact is, we are not very competitive.
Yes, we're obviously not competitive, and I think the results show for itself that we have less than 0.6% of the world tourism share. And I think this is really due to a plethora of reasons. And I think the biggest one is that I think when the Constitution of India was written, tourism was forgotten. And therefore, it today lies between the center and the states. So there's no one body really controlling it. And I think as a result of that, we have problems of different kinds. The benefits of tourism have not flowed down to the powers that be. We still consider tourism as an elitist activity and not an economic activity.
Arjun Sharma, everybody in India, the government that is, thinks that tourism is an elitist activity. But what can the private players do to try and make it competitive?
Well, I think to begin with, first, I think from the government perspective, we need to make tourism a national priority. I think all of us as stakeholders need to work together. I think the hotel industry needs to expand itself. The hotel industry needs to be more efficient. The airlines need to be, I would say, more healthy. And we as the travel and tourism industry need to bring all these together and package India in the right and innovative manner.
Kapil Kaur, to make India more competitive, we should also look at domestic tourism. Arjun just mentioned airlines. We all know what's happening with the airline industry. How is that possible? How can we talk about these great numbers until we have the airlines healthy once again?
Let's discount for the fact that we are very high in tariffs right now. Otherwise, from 2004, the industry lost $10 billion, but it only created economic surplus, consumer surplus, because the fares, people started traveling who could afford to pay $10,000 by paying $4,000. So they created a surplus. It had an impact on hotels, it had impact on tourism, it had impact on entire value chain, but it made the airlines very vulnerable. And the impact of the last 7 years is now that they have $10 billion, they're unfinanceable. Almost, except if they have big promoters to support it, most of them don't have a viable business case. So that's one. So if you don't make your airline industry viable, competitive, you cannot have the kind of impact that you would. We were talking just now in the car about excess. We have a capacity challenge. And I don't see any capacity challenge being sorted out in the next 12 to 18 months in domestic, because the entry levels to a domestic operation now is very, very high. International excess, which changed from 2004 to 2008-9, where we dramatically opened our bilateral regime. But we have, again, because of Air India, closed the bilaterals. So I don't think we have a framework as far as aviation is concerned. And I like to highlight 2-3 critical points why aviation is not competitive. First of all, from a policy and regulatory aspect, we have a very weak institutions. Whether it's DGCA, whether it's Ministry of Civil Aviation, from an intellectual IP perspective, technical capability perspective, we have weak institutions. We don't have a policy framework, and you'll be surprised to know that aviation is going to attract $120 billion of investment. We don't have a policy as of now. And third thing, our
you don't even know if you're going to be allowed to have FDR. Foreign carriers are going to be allowed to invest.
Yes, and our competitiveness in terms of fares, I mean, 50 to 60% of your cost is fuel. If the currency is at 65% of your cost are in dollar, which would mean the impact of fuel and currency itself is massive. So I don't think we have an economic framework. We don't have a competitive framework to make sure that aviation plays a critical role. And then third important thing is that we always are talking about short term. Look at the airport capacities we have. Most of the industry is not aware that in the next 10 years, you need 50 greenfield airports to be built, and at all the tourism destinations. You look at Jaipur, it is a capacity shortage. Jaipur doesn't have a long-term airport capacity, and you can't build airport.
Look at Goa, disaster.
You can't build an airport capacity overnight.
Now, Kunal, we just heard all the problems that airlines are facing. What can hospitality do to stay competitive? Your profitability of all the hotels is also down. We're talking about a fact that you have a shortage of 180,000 rooms, but there is right now a short-term surplus. So what can hotels do?
I think that people would not come just for monuments like this alone. People come for an overall experience. The holiday is an experience. I think India has failed to create that overall experience. If our bars shut at 11 o'clock and 11:30, what the hell do the tourists do at night, etc.? So you've got to look at an overall experience. The experience includes hygiene, sanitation, etc. Looking at the vastness of India, I think what we need to do, the government and the private sector together, is...
But it's not just because of sanitation or hygiene that, perhaps we're losing market share to Thailand and to Singapore, etc. It's a whole host of other issues as well.
Amongst other things, yes, one of the biggest issues is you need a level playing field. Taxation in India is higher than any other part of the world. A global average of taxation on tourism, cumulative, is 4 to 5%. India is anything between 25 and 30%.
So you're that much more expensive. So why should they come to India?
Absolutely. So taxation is one of the issues.
You're blaming taxation alone for India?
It's one of the issues, etc. And I think that I think the private sector is also, and all of us included, are to blame. If the benefits of tourism are understood by the government, right, and if we are able to advocate the benefits, why wouldn't they come and give us our benefits, right? But the fact is, I think that all of us have been making our point only to the center. But a very major part of tourism is controlled by the
state government.
Right? So I think we've got to shift our focus to the states and not to Delhi alone. We've got to move to the states and let each state realize what is the benefit of tourism. Just to give you a macro picture, it is expected that by 2020, India would have created another 125 million jobs. This is according to a Reserve Bank of India study. Tourism has the capacity to absorb 35 million of these people. Now, if those benefits are sort of told to people and told, why wouldn't somebody, take out pro-tourism policies? I think if India's demographic dividend is to become an economic dividend, these people have to be employed, isn't it? And tourism is the biggest contributor to this. Globally, tourism contributes to 8.1% of employment. In India, it's 9.2%.
Sujit Banerjee, does the centre realize all this? You've worked in the government, you've had a big role to play as far as tourism goes in the past, you've been secretary of the tourism ministry. Does the centre realize the importance of this?
Well, centre does realize the importance, but many of those things lie in words rather than deeds, And it has been my feeling that travel, tourism and hospitality seems to be like a neglected sector. You have to look at statistics, what is the total outlay through the plans to tourism, hospitality and travel. It was 0.11% in the third plan. It went up to 0.24% in the 11th plan. And the annual outlays have been just like 1,000 crores. 1,000 to 1,200 crores per year to be distributed between 37 states and union territories with their priorities. Even if you have to shift the emphasis to the states, how much would you be able to give each one of them? And so it's like everything that you do. None of our proposals are ever put up in the budget, and the fact that 1 million rupees investment creates 78 jobs in the tourism sector, 45 in the agriculture sector and 18 in the industrial sector. Nobody gives that importance.
Highest multiplier. But again, I'm coming back to the same thing. It's a question of advocacy. Correct. Why, if such are the benefits, etc., and which are as clear as Mr. Banerjee just put it, there obviously has to be some failure on even our part to have been able to sort of communicate this. We've had success at the center. I think today the Planning Commission note says pro-poor tourism, etc., and that's how the tourism plan has been drafted out, etc. But we've again failed at the states. Why are hotels expensive? Because land is expensive. In addition to land being expensive, the FSI that most states give is 2 or 2.5. Manhattan has 18. Hong Kong or Singapore is 14 or 16. Who has to do this? The states. Most of the taxes are again from where? States. Kapil spoke of aviation turbine fuel. Who levies that tax? The state. So my point comes back that I think perhaps we need to take our message now to the states collectively as an industry, and
You'll also be hoping that GST is rolled out as it's supposed to.
Yeah, we need GST big time. But the other quick thing I would say which should help spur quick tourism is actually, which is at the center level, is access. And when I say access, I mean that our visa regime, for example, is so stifling. And the other very important part of access is air capacity. If we have to move from 5 million to say even 11 million that we all want to reach, where is the air capacity? So really, in order to try and protect Air India, India is being forgotten. So really, as an industry, we have a question: is India more important or Air India more important? Now you talk of budgetary support, which Mr. Banerjee mentioned. Tourism Ministry has 1,200 crores a year of budgetary support. Air India gets 6,000 crores of our taxpayers' money to try and be efficient.
But why do you want budgetary support with companies like ITC or etc. here? Why do you need budgetary support?
Well, I think the foremost is the multiplicity of taxation that hits tourism. As Nakul said, tourism today is taxed at about 30-odd%. Our global competitors, Thailand, Singapore, taxation is between 4 to 5%. So when we are incompetitive.
One point which I think is coming out of this is that is stronger advocacy, and I don't know what framework we evolve for that advocacy, which is very important. Second is that you need a point guard leadership to promote tourism. I am quite certain the tourism ministry can't do it. It's increasingly going to get irrelevant.
Is it even a relevant ministry?
It's an irrelevant ministry. Had it been under commerce, you would have seen the dynamics much more stronger.
But they have done something for that, because of the presentation that the stakeholders and Ministry of Tourism made to the Honorable Prime Minister in June last year. They have set up an interministerial coordination committee under the chairmanship of the Principal Secretary of the Prime Minister. So, that point guard system that you are saying is in force.
So going forward, what is the plan of action? Because right now, you've had these meetings, whether it's with the Prime Minister, with the Planning Commission, or with Pulok Chatterjee, and things haven't really worked out. So what can you do outside of government support?
No, I think, it's within government support. I think what we need to do is, and this is exactly what CII's agenda is, and the CII Committee for Tourism agenda is, collectively with one voice, we take our message to the states, and we show them and demonstrate the benefits of tourism.
Have you started that process?
We are starting that process now, and that's why we are meeting today to work out a plan of action for that and take our message. Another very important benefit, we spoke of employment, we spoke about a number of other benefits, is redistribution of income. I think as India goes forward, that's going to be a very, very important part of our economy, and if we don't succeed in that, and tourism is a great redistributor of income.
Right, on that note, let's just take a short break, but stay tuned. You're watching a CNBC TV 18 special. Welcome back. You're watching a CNBC TV 18 special coming to you all the way from the land of the Taj. Right now, we have a situation where we don't know if Kingfisher is going to survive. What's going to happen with Air India? Because of all the political reasons, perhaps the government is not able to, get the reform agenda going. So what's the solution?
We are lucky in a sense that Indian promoters have the highest appetite to lose money as far as aviation is concerned.
But even that's what you think.
I'm being honest. Most of them would not have been surviving if you don't have promoters who are willing to go out of the way to support business. Kingfisher is one example. Air India is another example. And there are many examples. I don't like to take individual names. So, and that's because of the fact that beyond a point, it's no longer business, it's something more than business. It's going to change. And I'm seeing that strategic shift happening. Because earlier it was a loss leadership pricing. You used to sell at any cost to get market share. Now banks, leasing companies, financial institutions, regulators, even investors are not asking these guys to change their model. So even if you see in the Q2 of this year, where traditionally it's a seasonal dip, the weakest in the fiscal year, you are seeing congestion tax coming back, you're seeing fuel surcharges coming back, which used to be the opposite way. They used to reduce fares. In fact, the airlines have realized, and I think that strategic shift has happened. A result of that strategic shift should be, I don't see fares coming down because I don't see fuel coming down below 100 in the near term. We would see in the near term, because of the currency challenge, between 52 to 55. Even if the rupee has reached the end of its weakness, it's going to hold up at 55. So the cost structure is going to be severe. and the customer will have to be. In fact, airlines are not fully passing on the costs. So I would think the fares are
airlines are not fully passing on the cost,
even at this point. Yes.
So airlines are not making money. Hotels are not making money.
Who's making money?
Travel agents actually thrive in this bad environment, so it's not a bad problem to be in. But really, in the long-term issue is that if these people, the hotels and the aviation, is not healthy in the country, the long-term future of tourism in India is at stake. And I think really we need a healthy aviation, we need a healthy hotel industry. And truly, what Kapil has not probably mentioned is that we've had roughly a 15 to 20% reduction in the air capacity within India. So today, even a Delhi-Bombay airfare is up 70-80% versus 2 quarters back. So that's a really big problem for domestic tourism.
No, capacity, there's a very moderate increase in capacity if you look at Q1 was this year versus Q1 last year.
The point this is the first quarter.
The point I was trying to make, if I can complete what I said about the financials, which is an important indicator that how difficult this business is. That we had a revenue increase of roughly 15-20% for Jet Airways, and yet they had to resort to a sale and lease back to make profitability at the net level. So in spite of these fare increases and capacity rationalization that's happened, Q1 financials indicate that we don't have a cost structure to create a sustainable business model, and that's the challenge.
But then with Jet doing all this, just to understand, why is it that a new player like Indigo can actually overtake Jet? It has done so in last month.
You will always find examples. If you look at the 90s, and I was a part of the 90s cycle of airlines, one airline made money, that was Jet Airways. In 93 to 2000, there was only Jet which made money, and in this decade, Indigo is making money. So you get these exceptional cases where people will do well. But you must talk also about the rest of the industry. Indigo is an outstanding example. And you would not see...
has one exception, but profitability of all hotel companies are coming down. The fact also remains that, we are in the midst of a slowdown. So while we are talking of the need to have a level playing field, we do have a short-term surplus, etc. right now. So what does this mean for hotels? Are you actually perhaps holding back on expansion plans, stuff like that going on?
I can speak of ITC. I said we're certainly not holding back on our expansion plans. The chairman had announced a $2 billion expansion plan. We continue to go ahead with that. And as I mentioned, I said that we have great faith in this, and all I'm saying is I come back to my 1%, and that 1% will double the number of tourists in a short of 180,000 rooms.
But for that 1%, don't you think hotels and airlines should also be working together, which is something we don't see?
We're working together all the time. I mean, the very fact that we're all sitting here together and we're all meeting in a later part of this is, this particular committee, which is the CII's Committee on Tourism, it's all about that, where all stakeholders of the industry come together and put their heads together and see how we can move forward.
So has the CII committee actually chalked out a plan? Which states you will approach first, etc.? Have you been able to come out with such a plan?
That's exactly what we're going to discuss, and that's really our way forward, is that we understand that the benefits of tourism once told, right, nobody can deny them. We understand that today India needs tourism more than tourism needs India. Let me put it that way. Because of the economic growth that you look at, tourism can contribute to a substantial part in the history of India's economic development the next 5 to 8 years. It's all that we have failed to advocate our message, and we've perhaps given it to the wrong place. We need to correct that. Automatically, I would believe that state governments would begin to compete with each other. They would reduce their taxes, begin to manage data with each other and compare and say how many tourists I got, how many they got. This destination is number 1, this destination is number 2, and so on and so forth.
Also, don't forget that in the current environment where for a country like ours the dollar is very precious, it's the only import tourism that actually earns foreign exchange. So really, as an industry, we earn about $25 billion, and if you look at our outflow in order to promote it is less than 4 or 5% of the net tourism inflows that come in. So really, as companies like ours, we earn maybe about 400 crores in foreign exchange. We spend about 5 crores to promote it. So rest of it is all foreign exchange that comes and stays in the country and is absorbed across the country, and not just only in Delhi and Bombay. So it's that tourism dollar is going into the artisans, the job creation, the multiplier effect.
I'd like to just add one thing. We talked about education, and I had a pleasure of giving a presentation to a state government, and I will not name it. The moment you talk about economic benefit, I think they understand that. They understand multiplier. I don't think that they have the wherewithal to get their act together. So you would need a private sector or some advocacy forum to help them. But if you tell them that there's a socio-economic impact and it's related to the vote bank, if you tell them that like retail and other sort of segments of the economy that have a direct bearing on your vote banks, I think transformational changes will happen.
So while you will all ask for that fiscal regime, a level playing field, I just want to talk my last question on the short term impact, which is right now all companies, whether it's hotel companies or airlines, have to increase tariffs simply to stay in business, otherwise they'll be out of business. But then that's a deterrent, it's a chicken and egg situation, because it's a deterrent for the traveller to actually come out with a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at the fact that there's been a devaluation of the rupee by about 15-16%, and that should logically mean more foreign tourists coming to India. But what has happened is, but what has happened is that the airfares to India have gone up. There's increased taxation. Our airports in Delhi have increased the landing charges. There is obviously a little, unfortunately, the petrol prices have gone up. So the benefit of that devaluation is getting lost in the increase in the air tickets.
For domestic tourism, I would, for example, there's a huge perception that perhaps going to Thailand is cheaper than going to Goa. There's no dollar rupee there.
Air travel, not hotel.
No, air travel. No, but even in the hotel, if you look at it, the fact is that we don't have the density of hotels needed. Now, as Nakul said, that there is the only FAR allowed in Goa is even less than 1.5. It is 0.33. It is 0.33% for the first 500 meters. Whereas in Phuket, it's 3.5. Now, obviously, those same rooms are more affordable to you because you can build on that same piece of land, and land is a big issue. So today we can't grow this way. We have to grow this way in a sustainable and an eco-friendly manner. So we have to get tourism right. We have to get the urban ministries around it at the state levels to understand the fact that we need a better land bank policy.
Which is why, what is the tourism ministry's role today? It's just a coordinator.
Absolutely. You know, the most important point would be how...
And it's not a coveted post. No minister says, I want to be a tourism minister.
How do you take these 5.78 million to 11.24 million foreign tourists and domestic tourists from 810 million to 1740 million? I mean, it needs a micro plan of so many elements, and that can be pushed forward by this coordination committee.
Gentlemen, we're running out of time, so before we wrap up, one by one, very quickly, one top wish list that you guys have, starting with you.
That we're able to communicate our message to the states.
Just make tourism a national priority for the socio-economic benefit it brings to all of us.
Continue to educate the political class that the tourism can have the same impact like retail and other businesses.
Recognize the importance of tourism to employment generation and give it its due in whatever way possible.
So there you have it, an exhaustive list. Private players saying the government has to get its act together. It's made a huge wish list as far as the centre goes. Nothing has ever worked out. So now the plan and the strategy is to go to the state governments. Will they succeed or not? We'll have to only watch out and see. But for now, we're going to wrap up. Thanks for watching.